Welcome back into the Pigskin Cafe. My name is Hampton Sipper, and I've got Graham Haney back in the co-pilot seat talking all things college football, but specifically Alabama and their win over Eastern Illinois and a look ahead to the Iron Bowl this Saturday and what is going to be a stress-inducing, anxiety-filled game, but we're going to break it all down here. And at the end, we're going to have a fun conversation about Lane Kiffin and the circus that is following him in Oxford. And we're going to break that all down here at the end of the show. But before we dive into anything, be sure, if you haven't already, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, leave us a like on the video, leave us a comment, and hit that notification bell. We appreciate each and every one of you very, very much. We're thankful to the Lord above that we're able to do this, and we're thankful for you, and we hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving. So, Graham, you hadn't been on in a few weeks, brother. There's been a lot that has transpired. I think the last game that you were on, Alabama had beat Tennessee, and then the following week they pulled out a tight one in South Carolina and Columbia, and then we had, the games that followed. So I want to kick it to you. I want you to talk a little bit about Eastern Illinois, but let's be honest. There was a reason that we weren't in a rush to get this show out, because I don't think people were chomping at the bit to hear us go wax poetically for about an hour at how Alabama dismantled Eastern Illinois. But from your perspective, what have you seen from Alabama in the past 3 or 4 games, and what do you think it means kind of going forward into this game versus Auburn?
Yeah, it's good to be back with you, Hampton. You're just, as always, good to talk college football, and, it's been a minute, so kind of feel like I've been missing out on part of my life. Man, I think that when you look at Alabama these past few weeks, we had a big game against Tennessee, take care of business. It's so emotional for some of us, and, we end up pulling out a victory. And then we followed that up going to South Carolina, and I don't necessarily know if we found a way to win or South Carolina found a way to lose. If you've seen South Carolina play at all this season, they're very good at the second point of that. They're very good at finding ways to lose. Then we lose to Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a good team, and I think that it's the first time in several weeks that Oklahoma not was at full strength, but outside of a piece here or there, Material's back healthy, looked back to, I would say, somewhat of his normal self. But Oklahoma's very good, and Alabama, I think, when you look at all that's happened this season, I think the past few weeks we've lost our confidence. We've, in a sense, gotten complacent with it's just okay. We have not tried to or forced the opponent to defend certain aspects of our game. We've gotten one-dimensional. And then we go to Eastern Illinois, and Alabama, as I said they should, Alabama shouldn't throw the ball more than 10 times the whole game. They should run the ball and run the ball and run the ball, because that's what we've struggled to do. And not that Eastern Illinois is going to be the same defense you'll play with Auburn, or if you make the SEC championship game, who you'll play then, or if you make the playoff or not. But Eastern Illinois is not a very good team, but Alabama needs to get some rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And it does not matter who you're playing, you can still build rhythm. You can force the tempo. You can, in a sense, kind of command what is expected of you and rebuild that confidence. So I hope that that's what Alabama got out of a dominant performance against Eastern Illinois. Rushed for almost 270 yards. Really put the ball on the ground a lot, which was good. And I think as the game went by, that was the game script that it had to be forced. You're up early. Eastern Illinois does nothing good offensively, and so you're just trying to run clock and get out of there without getting injured, getting hurt. Knowing that this week the Iron Bowl is the biggest game of the year for Alabama, and I think unfortunately now that Alabama has 2 losses, it's even pressed its way up even higher up the totem pole of most important games of the season, because we can talk about it in a minute as we set up for the Iron Bowl. But this Alabama team, I'm not saying they're coasting, but I don't feel a lot of confidence in what's going to happen on Saturday. I think that I don't think that you can predict with confidence as a fan what Alabama team is going to show up and what Auburn team is going to show up. I just don't know that you can. And for whatever reason, that's just the cards that we have to play. But Eastern Illinois, not good. Ty Simpson needs to get back on he needs to get back in rhythm. Didn't have a great game against Oklahoma. Threw 2 interceptions against Eastern Illinois, more just kind of forcing things that he did not have to against Eastern Illinois, and obviously it did not end up hurting Alabama, but could have made the score a lot more ugly if Alabama was able to capitalize and not, in a sense, turn the ball over so much. But overall, we ran the ball a lot, which was good, and I expected us to do so. And I'm glad that it ended up with 270 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground. But hopefully that just gives us some rhythm and at least a little bit of confidence going into the Iron Bowl this week.
Yeah, I think your confidence point is an interesting one. And I don't know if I would characterize it as that, because I think defensively, and we've kind of been consistent on this, defense is playing lights out, and they've been playing lights out for the majority of the year, and I feel like they continually get better and better and better. Now, granted, especially the past 4 opponents, you have not faced an offense that is capable of threatening you, through the air or even on the ground to the level that I even think Auburn can present this weekend with the weapons that they have on the outside, with a quarterback that is playing with confidence and wasn't earlier in the year. And they've got a little bit of a run game going with Jeremiah Cobb, who I believe is one of the better backs in the SEC. But, I mean, to me, the defense is why you stayed in the game versus Oklahoma, because they were continually put in a disadvantageous position over and over and over again. And for the most part, they came out on top in those situations. They either forced field goals, or in a couple cases, they might have pushed Oklahoma out of field goal range. And that didn't happen as much as I would have liked to, and probably as much as they would have liked to. But all things considered, with the hand that they were dealt, they played really, really well. And they've continually elevated their game, where the offense has kind of regressed. And I think maybe part of it is confidence. Maybe part of it is the flow and the rhythm. But I honestly think this stat speaks to the offense kind of sputtering down the stretch. And, again, this is a little off, like a sidebar rant, but I swear, Graham, there are things that you and I say on this podcast before anybody else does. And then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 weeks later, that's like the mainline media narrative, and everyone's like, oh, what a great point. I'm like, we've literally been saying this. We've been saying this in rant. So someone posted, and Clint Lamb, who was on the show, and he and I talked, to be fair, he and I talked about this when he came on our show. But I really emphasize that Jam Miller has not been the same running back since he came back from the concussion. You and I said that because Alabama's run game, the first 3 games before Jam Miller came back, and then after he came back against Georgia, against Vanderbilt, and against Missouri, it was drastically different and it was much improved. There's no doubt about that. These stats bear it out. Prior to concussion, 58 carries, 267 yards, 4.6 yards per carry. Was averaging 106.3 total yards per game. In the 4 games since the concussion, 39 carries, 81 yards, 2.1 yards per carry, averaging a total of 31.3 total yards per game. The run defense average that he faced in the 3 games where he was thriving was 15. It was about 15th in the country. Then the past 4 games, it averaged to be about the 30th rush defense in the country. And that's in SEC games. That's not counting Eastern Illinois, because I think you can kind of throw that out. But ultimately, that speaks to the larger point of when Alabama's offense was functioning at its max, there was a run game to complement this passing game. And right now, there is not one. even against Oklahoma, when you ran it better than you thought you would coming into the game, part of that, I think, was Oklahoma was not respecting your run game. And so in certain situations, you had a box count that was advantageous for you, and you did, to your credit, take advantage. But you couldn't consistently churn out yards like you needed to on the ground. And they were almost allowing you to do that because they were all about stopping Alabama's passing game. And every team from pretty much Missouri on has employed that game plan because they don't respect Alabama's rushing attack. So in turn, there's way too much on Ty Simpson in this passing attack, and they've been off by a little bit here and there. And so when they're off by a little bit, the offense sputters, and you've seen the results that you've seen. What I do think is encouraging going forward is that even against Oklahoma, when you did not execute all the time at the level that you needed to, you made critical mistakes in critical moments. You gave up 4 sacks. 2 of those were on the running backs in pass protection. You turned the ball over twice, one being the interception, one being the fumble. You still executed probably better than you had against the defense of that caliber since Tennessee. You put up 400 yards on that Oklahoma defense, who I believe is one of the top 3, top 5 units in the country. So going into Auburn, I think you can feel better about the execution side of it. You just have to eliminate the critical mistakes and critical errors. And really against this Eastern Illinois, I felt Alabama was very generic, very basic in what they were doing offensively. Like you said, they were committed to running the ball and getting reps doing that. But I still, like you, Graham, probably, I didn't feel overwhelmingly encouraged that they ran for 270 against Eastern Illinois, because they still were not able to generate a ton of explosive runs. It was like a 4 or 5 yards here, 4 or 5 yards there. And I just think that overall was concerning. Now, I was encouraged by A.K. Deere and his performance. I think he showed you a little bit of what fans have been clamoring for as far as the explosive element that he brings to that rushing attack. But it just overall, it's just lackluster. It almost seemed like Alabama heard what Hunter Yurachek said and said, you know what, by gosh, if you're going to put our rushing numbers, use that against us in the college football playoff ranking, by gosh, we're going to rush for 270 and make you use that argument and twist yourself in a pretzel trying to defend it this week, which was funny. But what do you make of all that, Graham? And going into the Iron Bowl, as we kind of transition, I want you to react to kind of what I broke down as far as offense goes. But offensively, going into the Iron Bowl, what do you think the biggest key is against that Auburn defense, who is a great unit themselves?
Yeah, we're not even going to get into the conversation about the playoff selection committee, because I think that, I mean, they're just going in circles as to what's important to them. It's just a circle.
It's a moving target.
It just moves all the time. Going back on what you said, I do think that when we lost to Oklahoma, and I said this, it was not the end of our season. Oklahoma was a good team. Alabama, I mean, like, just lost by an edge. A field goal made here, a better decision on a 4th down call could have been the difference in winning and losing that game. But we know that Oklahoma's good, but everything that Alabama wants is still in front of them. They still control their destiny, which, as a college football, coach, as a college football fan, that's all you want for your team, is that, hey, at least it's in our hands to take care of. You don't want to have to rely on this or that happening or this or that happening. Like the AC, whoever's going to win the ACC and make the ACC championship game is like that right now. In order for so-and-so to make it, these teams have to lose and these teams have to win. And anyway, for Alabama, it's nice that we control our own destiny. If we win against Auburn, then we'll make it to the SEC championship game. If we win the SEC championship game, you're guaranteed to make the playoff because it's a guaranteed spot. If you don't do one of those things, then you really are putting it up in the air as to what will happen with the playoff selection committee. And then again, we don't know what the reasoning is going to be. We don't know what metrics they're going to use to justify their own decisions based off of. Well, I think it's just what you'll see one week is not what they'll base it off the next week. So one week it's like point differential, the next week it's like ranked matchups and all kind of stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, they're both important. We can't just say one's the difference and one's the different. Anyway, so going back to your point, I totally agree. Jam Miller has not looked the same since coming back from the concussion. We've seen it time and time again that Alabama running backs just aren't hitting the holes that are there, and sometimes they're cutback lanes, which might not be game planned or scripted, but that's the opening that is available, and you got to take advantage of that instead of running straight into the hole where the defender is, or running in the back of your lineman on 4th and 1. We've got to find a way to find the gap, to find the hole. And I don't think that our running back room has currently, their vision's not up to par as to what they need to do. And as that goes into the Iron Bowl, what's going to be the keys for Alabama's offense in order to take down Auburn? I definitely think it's not that you have to be completely balanced, but you need to be efficient on the ground. We know that Ty Simpson can throw the ball. We've got quality receivers. We've got an offensive line that's actually not the worst at pass blocking. That's kind of that's where we seem to have our best matchups is in the passing game. Ty Simpson has a really good arm, a good ability to see receivers open and to throw the ball into small windows, which is what you need in an NFL quarterback. However, you have to be able to take some pressure off of him, Hampton, like you said. And I think that's so important. If you can force Auburn to have to guess on what you're doing, 2nd and medium, 3rd and short, if Auburn has to guess, then that puts you at the advantage. If it's 2nd and long, 3rd and long, Alabama has to throw it. We know we have to. Auburn knows we have to. I mean, the Pee Wee coaches know we got to do that because we just don't have the capabilities to run the ball on 2nd and long to convert for either a first down or make it a 3rd and short. So I'm not saying we have to be a balanced attack because Alabama has shown this whole season that they're not going to be. I mean, even against Eastern Illinois, we're run heavy, not pass heavy. It seems like every other game we're more pass heavy. But we need to be efficient on the ground. That's all I'm going to say. And that does not meet a certain number. That is not like a certain metric. That is not a certain conversion. That is, we've got to be efficient enough to take some of the pressure off of Ty Simpson so that Auburn can't just, either drop 8 back in coverage or bring 6 in pressure or 7 in pressure to force the ball out of Ty's hand before it needs to be. So I'd say that's the keys to the game. I'm going to go ahead and start talking about what my thoughts are on Auburn.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And then you pass back to you. We've seen a different Auburn team these past 2 weeks against Vanderbilt. Well, I guess 3 weeks, but 2 games. Vanderbilt and then against Mercer. And I don't know if that is necessarily the change in coaching. I definitely think part of it is because Auburn's offense was abysmal for the first half of the season. And to see them put up 38 points against Vanderbilt and then put up, golly, they blew up against Mercer. It was close to the beginning, but really did blow up towards the end. We saw that Auburn had 2 weeks of the final score 62-17, so 62 points. So a lot of points. FCS opponents, so that's really, not saying it's not that impressive, but that's not a woo out of the ordinary kind of thing. But Auburn these past 2 weeks have had very little film to show their opponents leading into that week. I say that because you transfer the offensive coordinator play calling duties from Hugh Freeze to a new person against Vanderbilt. Well, Vanderbilt doesn't know the tendencies of that play caller. Yeah. And Vanderbilt doesn't know the tendencies of that play caller. And, let's just be straight up. Auburn's offense opened up a lot of ways and looked a lot better and more impressive. And you can point that to a lot of reasons. But Vanderbilt had not had time to prepare for that. You can only look back at the weeks beforehand and see, okay, this is what Auburn has done, but now you got a new play caller. Again, you don't know the tendencies. And Auburn plays Vanderbilt as close as any game they played all year. As on the ropes the whole time. Vanderbilt ends up winning in overtime. And then you get to Mercer. It's announced beforehand that Deuce Knight's going to get the start. And as just a fan of college football and somebody that doesn't want the worst for Auburn at all times, Auburn should have been playing Deuce Knight against Vanderbilt, against Mercer, against Alabama. It does not matter. You fired your coach. Hugh Freeze is gone. So what's the benefit of making a bowl game this year to the Music City Bowl, and if you win 6 games? What's the benefit of that? Are Auburn fans more excited? No, they're not. What's going to excite them is getting a good hire in there that's going to actually encourage them to buy season tickets, contribute to NIL, actually be excited for Auburn football again. But this week, they bring up, or this past week, Deuce Knight gets to start for Auburn. And for Mercer, again, what game film do you have to look at for Deuce Knight? New play caller, new quarterback, and you see Deuce Knight have a career game in his first start. You're lethal on the ground, lethal in the air, which for Auburn fans, that has to be encouraging. And as a person that's as a football fan, for Auburn, they have to decide, is Deuce Knight the guy? Or do we have to go get another guy in the portal next year? If Deuce Knight's the guy, great. And that makes the coaching staff, that makes the coaching hire even more appealing. That makes the opportunities for and the likelihood that your receivers and playmakers will stay at Auburn more likely. But it also means that, going forward, that you at least know you have the guy and you can build around a quarterback. Whereas for the first 6 weeks, well, Jackson Arnold's not the guy. What's the guy's name from Stanford that they set out? Daniels. Ashton Daniels, not the guy, but kind of might be the guy, so we're going to sit him out a year. And then you got Deuce Knight, who has played a little bit this year, but hasn't really been given the reins like he fully needs to. So as an Auburn fan, you need to be encouraged. But that benefits Alabama going into this week because now you've seen 2 games of a new play caller. You've seen a full game of Deuce Knight at quarterback. So if you're Alabama fans, you're just begging that they put in Jackson Arnold or Ashton Daniels to play quarterback instead of Deuce Knight. Because I think that what we've seen is that Deuce Knight might not be the highest floor, but he definitely has the highest ceiling of any of those quarterbacks in that room. We know that Jackson Arnold has the lowest floor. I mean, we've seen games like that where he just intentionally, or I'm not saying intentionally, but he loses the game for him and is not able to convert when needed to. So the more I talk about it, the more confident I am in Alabama this week. But playing at 6:30 in Jordan-Hare with Auburn's season on the line, you could say, they have nothing to lose. The coaching staff doesn't know if they'll have a job next year. The players don't know if they're going to stay or go. So you put it all together, and it's just a big question mark. Auburn might come and hang 50 on Alabama. But Auburn could also show up and score less than 10. We can see that too. But all that said, it leads to an exciting game on Saturday that really is going to define, in a sense, the college football season for Alabama and for Auburn. And with all that being said, this game, the Iron Bowl, 6:30, Saturday night, Jordan-Hare, really sets up to define Alabama and Auburn's season. And Hampton, as a college football fan, as an Alabama fan, I'm excited to watch it, especially knowing that there's something on the line going into Auburn. Hampton, we know that Alabama's future in the SEC championship game's on the line, that the college football playoff hopes are on the line. But Hampton, what is it going to take for Alabama this week against Auburn to be successful?
Well, I can't agree with you that I'm excited to watch this because I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's going to be a pretty miserable game to watch, as these often are when Alabama plays in Jordan-Hare. And I want to speak to your point about this being the defining game of the season for both teams. obviously for Auburn, if they win this game, it's their Super Bowl. It makes their year. I not only think this is a defining game for the season for Alabama. Obviously, it is. Everything's on the line. If you lose this, you're out of the playoff hunt and you're playing in the Birmingham Biscuit Bowl, basically. And all the goodwill that you had earned after that Florida State win, you peed it down the drain. But not only do I think it's season defining, I think it's a defining legacy game for Kalen DeBoer. Because if he loses this game, I'm not saying he's on the hot seat. I'm not saying that he would be fired or anything like that. I'm just telling you the pressure would ramp up to an obscene level. You cannot, if you are Kalen DeBoer, lose this game. It just can't happen. Just can't happen. Because basically, you would have a mirror of last year. It would be deja vu all over again. Instead of the Oklahoma game, though, like last year, it would be the Auburn game and the final game of the year. Everything's in front of you. All you have to do is win this one game. And then the season will unfold how it will unfold. You will more than likely be in the playoff. Win or lose in the SEC championship, you are more than likely in the playoff. And that, in Alabama fans' eyes, is considered a success. Now, obviously, a championship is the ultimate prize that is expected at the capstone, and obviously they will have an opportunity to play for that. But I think every Alabama fan will be happy or content, at least. That is like the baseline criteria. You have to make the playoff this year. 100%. Yep. Would you agree with that, Graham?
Absolutely.
Yes. So if you lose, I get Auburn's playing better. I get that they have looked a little bit different, not even a little bit, a lot different since Hugh Freeze got fired. No doubt about it, especially offensively. I think Derek Nix has done a fantastic job because they have really crafted a game plan around Ashton Daniels in the Vanderbilt game and around Deuce Knight in the Mercer game of, hey, you know what a great idea is? Maybe let's get the ball to our playmakers who we paid a lot of money to get here and who are first-round talents. Novel concept, I know, but I guess Hugh Freeze didn't figure that out on the golf course. But
I'm about to say, and I mean, not to mention that you're paying them millions of dollars in NIL money. You know, like.
Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, to not have them be a focal point of your offense from the jump is just malpractice, and obviously one of the many reasons that he lost his job. But not only that, they've really started to feature Jeremiah Cobb a lot more and given him carries, and he's taken full advantage. And he's one of the better backs in the SEC. I think he's a top 3, top 5 back in the conference this year. He's almost at 1,000 yards for the season, and that's with limited opportunities. So I know that they're playing better, but you are still a better football team than this Auburn team. And yes, the Jordan Hare voodoo is real, but Alabama has been here before. 2021 and 2023, the same scenario that we're talking about right now, it was the same scenario for those teams. They went in there facing a down-on-their-luck Auburn team who had nothing to play for other than peeing on Alabama's parade. And it was ugly as sin. Both of those games were. But ultimately, Alabama found a way to win, and that is what you have to do this Saturday. You have to find a way to win. Because if you don't, we're going to have a tough conversation here on Sunday on this show about the season as a whole, but also the future of this program. Again, I'm not going to say if Alabama loses, we're going to come on here and say, all right, Graham, let's chip in for the buyout. You know, I'm going to go around the enterprise. You're going to go around you follow. We're going to start collecting money. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying it's going to be like DEFCON 2 or 3. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
For breaking down, go ahead.
If I say it raises the likelihood that Kalen DeBoer might leave for another job just to get out of town while the getting's good. Because we've heard those rumors, but that's just
We have heard those rumors, and I don't think there's any validity to one of the schools that has been mentioned. But if some other dominoes fall, you never know. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
You never know. And I don't want to embrace that reality. I don't want to live in that reality, but it's one that is facing us square in the face. So, from the breakdown side of it, offensively for Alabama, this Auburn defense can be had through the air. Diego Pavia threw for like 400 yards on them. Diego Pavia, who I believe Alabama held him to like less than 200 yards throwing in the air. I mean, he's a really good player, one of the best in the country, one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, no doubt. But they threw for a ton on him. Baylor obviously threw for a ton on him. John Mateer had his best game in the air versus Auburn. And, I know you mentioned Mateer did look better against Alabama, no doubt, than he had previously. But the dude threw for like 150, 130, 150. It wasn't like he lit Alabama up like a Christmas tree. So what I'm saying is if Alabama protects Ty Simpson, I think that Alabama can throw and move the ball through the air. And the good thing is, while I think Auburn is really good defensively, they're really good up front. Obviously, Keldrick Falk is a potential first-round selection in the NFL draft. They've got two great linebackers, Xavier Atkins and Robert Woodyard, especially Atkins. He's been a really good player for them. He has 7.5 sacks on the year, and they're really good along that front. They have 28 total sacks on the year, but they don't have the caliber of like speed rushers that has given Alabama fits against a Missouri, against a South Carolina, against Oklahoma to an extent. Auburn doesn't have that caliber of personnel. They have really good pass rushers, but they're more, in my opinion, power. They're power guys, more physical in their pass rush. Obviously, Keldrick Falk can do a good job of turning and converting speed to power, but again, I don't think he's on the level of a Dylan Stewart, and that's no shade at him. I think he's a really, really good player. So to me, that is the key for Alabama on offense. Protect Ty Simpson, let the passing game get in rhythm, stay in second and third and manageable. Do not make a living on third and long. That is not going to be good for anybody. Obviously, you saw that against Oklahoma. And one thing that I think will benefit Alabama is that against Oklahoma, and I mentioned it on the pod after, they did a better job of changing up tendency on first down and throwing it more to be in better position to succeed on second and third down. Again, that wasn't always perfect because you had maybe an inaccurate pass, maybe you had a sack given up, or you just had a drop that kind of puts you behind the sticks. But staying on schedule is going to be paramount. For Alabama defensively, I think that Auburn, while they have looked really good offensively against Vanderbilt and against Mercer, you spoke to both teams not having the tape on them and this kind of revamped system to a degree, and Alabama now does. But I think more than anything, look, Deuce Knight was incredible against Mercer. I'm not taking anything away from the kid. I think he showed a lot of the traits that made him a 5-star prospect. But let's be honest. I watched those highlights, and it looked like Arch Manning playing against his Louisiana high school competition out there. Slow, not even close to getting him on the ground. There was just a vast chasm in talent between, obviously, Auburn and Mercer. Now, when you looked at the Vanderbilt game, I just don't think Vanderbilt is very good defensively, to be quite honest with you. Texas put up one of their best days of offense against Vanderbilt. Obviously, Alabama had their best rushing performance in the SEC against Vanderbilt, and we've all seen how Alabama struggles to run the ball. So I'm not saying that's fool's gold, but I do think Alabama defensively is a different caliber than the two teams that they have faced, obviously, in the past 2 or 3 weeks. And they have done a lot better job at stopping the run and limiting the explosive plays. So I think that's going to be key number one. Put the game on Ashton Daniels' shoulders because I'm assuming he's starting this game. And then I feel pretty good, even though Auburn's going to get theirs through the air. They're too talented not to. But I feel good about Dijon Lee. I feel good about Xavier Brown. I feel good about Bray Hubbard and Sab and all the other guys that play on that back end for Alabama to limit Auburn where they're not just throwing the ball all over the yard like they're the 99 Rams. So I'll give my pick, Graham, and then I want you to react to that and then give yours, and then we'll move on. But I believe this game is going to be a struggle. It is not going to be pretty, but ultimately, Alabama knows the importance of this game. Duh. Thanks, Booker McFarland, for that obvious statement. But I do think there's been a lot of talk about how after the Florida State game, there was a shell shock of, I can't believe this happened. Against Oklahoma, it was, we know who we are. Like, we gave them that game. Not taking anything away from Oklahoma, but look, anybody with a brain knows that Alabama gave them that game, and Oklahoma did force them into high-pressure situations that resulted in some of that happening. No doubt about it. But they know what's at stake, and ultimately, I think they find a way and they get it done, and they march on to the SEC championship. Graham, I know you said you feel more and more confident, but react to all that I kind of broke down, and then kind of give your final thoughts on the game, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the tape, a lot of the big plays that Deuce Knight had were just broken plays where nobody was open, but didn't make a throw and decides to run, and there's 75 yards to the house. Mm-hmm. So definitely inferior talent, and I would definitely agree that Vanderbilt's defense is not the strong part of their team. It definitely goes to Pavi in the offense and controlling time and controlling possession, and so I think Auburn was able to take advantage of that. However, the one thing that I don't know and I'm not as confident in is some of our DB play. Not that we're not gonna have plays, but our defensive backs. It doesn't seem to be every game, but will very often will either choose to be soft tackling or will read certain balls out of the air wrong and leads to big plays for the other team. That is my thing, that I think that Auburn has the receivers to take advantage of more of those than South Carolina did, than Oklahoma did, than Missouri, and all those other teams were able to do. With all that being said,
go ahead.
I'm
going to say specifically, is there a DB that comes to mind when you say that? Is there a DB that you think does that more than the others?
Yeah, Bray Hubbard is tackling wise.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, tackling wise, when it's hey, they're the other team has the ball at the 20-25 and they get it inside the 10. You already know that Bray Hubbard's going to miss the tackle and that they're going to score a touchdown. Just don't even waste another play. Just go ahead and and walk them in. But I think, like I said, that's the matchup that's Auburn's best matchup, is that their receivers are some of the best in college football. Now, can they find ways to get those guys involved and spread the ball out enough where Alabama can't take away one of them individually? We'll have to see. Like I said, the more we talk about it, the more confident I am that Alabama will take care of business. But man, the Jordan Hare voodoo, like you said, it is real. Alabama just can't overcome. They just can't. You can't mimic that atmosphere until you're there. So what you do is you practice, but your game is not going to go how your practice goes. But I would expect it to be a close game. I think it's supposed to be really cold on Saturday.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be really cold. So that, in a sense, kind of does take it to a slower pace game. Making sure you can throw the ball, catch the ball, and leads to a little more running the ball, which is not what Alabama's good at. But I think Alabama takes care of business, and I think Alabama wins by about 10 points. I think it's going to be 2 scores, but I don't think it's a blowout by any capacity. But if we win by 2 scores, I don't think we're going to be sitting on the edge of our seats if Alabama's up 2 scores, knowing that Auburn can score twice before Alabama can score once. So I think 2 scores, but I think it's going to be a brutal game. It's going to be a knockout, and man, I think that it could be one of those games that neither team gets to 30, but also neither team could get to 20. It could be it could be a 20 to 14 or 20 to 13 kind of game.
Yeah. I don't see this game getting to 30. I mean, Alabama hadn't scored 30 in SEC play all year. Now, they came close against South Carolina and got to 29. But
Yeah.
they've consistently been in the low to mid-20s, and I anticipate that's where it will be unless a miracle happens, which they happen every day, everyone. But
they do.
I
just not for Alabama at Jordan Hare. They don't.
I don't know. Shoot, the past 2 times that Alabama's been, the voodoo's kind of reversed. I mean, Bryce Young's final game-winning drive to send it into overtime, or not game-winning, but game-tying drive, and then 4th and 31 was about as improbable as it gets. Thank you, Hugh Freeze, for rushing 2 people and spying a third on Jalen Milroe. Thank you for that parting gift. I mean, that's still one of the most inexplicable coaching decisions that I've seen, but he might have already been thinking about his tea time the next day.
Yeah.
The last thing that I'll say on this game is, and I've heard other people say, and I do think there's merit to it, Saban always coached tight in Jordan Hare. He always did. And I even think, I want to say against, when he was at LSU, he had issues winning in Jordan Hare too. So that was always a little bit of a bugaboo for him. For some reason, I don't know why. It just happened. I don't think, with Kalen DeBoer, I think this is just another stadium to him. It's just another road environment. And Alabama, this year especially, has been good on the road. Now, South Carolina notwithstanding, they didn't execute very well in that game, and I thought part of that was they were coming off of a tough 4-game stretch, but the anxiety and everything after the Florida State game, I feel like Alabama's played pretty well on the road for the most part. Again, South Carolina notwithstanding. So that gives me a little bit of hope going into this game, and it's going to be interesting. Many ramifications, not only for Alabama but for Auburn, because if Auburn wins, you may be looking at DJ Durkin as their head coach. And you may be looking at that anyway, but especially if they win, I could see them getting swept up in the emotion of it all and ultimately hiring him. And it's going to be, like you said, Graham, it's going to be an Iron Bowl. And the Iron Bowl always delivers, especially in Jordan Hare. Bryant-Denny, not so much. We usually blow them out in Bryant-Denny. But we will be back next week, and we'll break it all down. And hopefully we're breaking down an Alabama victory. But let's transition before we get out of here and talk a little Lane Kiffin drama, circus, fiasco, however many superlatives you want to throw at it. That is what this whole process has been. And I'm going to give my 2 cents, and then I want to hear your take on it. But there's been a lot of talk about the college football calendar and how Lane is put in a bad position because of the calendar, and he's really just in a tough spot. And I would agree that he's in a tough spot. No doubt about it. He has a difficult decision to make, and he has earned the right to make that decision. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. What he has done at Ole Miss has been historic, truly, for that program. He's done a phenomenal job, and he has done a phenomenal job this year with this team, who is 10-1 heading into the Egg Bowl. And the shame in all of this is that this season that should be focused on these kids and on this team, and what they have done on the field has been hijacked by the shenanigans off of it, and it starts with Lane Kiffin. Don't blame LSU. Don't blame Florida. Lane Kiffin has brought a ton of this on himself. He has trolled his own fan base by, after you beat Florida, you talk about that's what an atmosphere is supposed to look like. I don't know what that was last week against the Citadel, to all these tweets, all these cryptic tweets that he usually does throughout the year, but it's not very cute when you're in this position. He tweeted out a 2026 like ceremony type picture with the hats on the table. Like, bro, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, you are literally burning up all the goodwill that you would build up to rehabilitate your image to becoming not only, he's always been known as Lane Kiffin the troll, Lane Kiffin the character. He still is that, but it was, well, I'm grown up now. I've made changes to my life. I'm grown up. I've left some of that silliness behind me. Well, clearly he hasn't, because again, you're trolling your own fan base. You're giving all of these answers that are so ambiguous. You go yesterday to the podium and talk about how, these kids nowadays, they understand because they're all mercenaries and they don't really, this new generation really isn't attached to a school like they used to be. And so they get it. They understand it more. And I want to give a shout out to McCready and Siskey. Neil McCready is a beat reporter for Ole Miss for 247, and they talked about on their show, they've heard from people in the building that they don't even know what's going on. Like Lane's not being clear with them, but meanwhile he's having his family go check out Baton Rouge and go check out Gainesville, and I'm sure a lot of other coaches are having that same process play out, but it's not getting out to the media. There was a reason that it got out. And ultimately, where I land on it is, Lane, if you aren't happy where you're at, are you ever going to be happy? Because you can say, oh, LSU's a better job, Florida's a better job. Is it? What can you do at LSU and at Florida that you're not doing now at Ole Miss? Especially when Ole Miss is probably, they've got a contract extension on your desk ready to sign that I'm sure is very comparable to what LSU and what Florida are offering you. And you said it's not about the money. So that shouldn't be an issue. They've given you everything that you want in NIL. You had one of the more expensive rosters last year, especially, and you went 9-3 and you still had a good year. But that roster, especially defensively, was littered with talent that you would find at an Ole Miss and that you would find at a Florida. So ultimately, why do you want to leave a team in the middle of a championship run? I can't understand it. I get it if you're 8-5 and you're middling and they come calling. I get it, man. And ultimately, you got to do what's best for you and your family. But to leave a team during a playoff run, which is what is probably going to happen, because I don't see a world right now where he stays. I think it's just unforgivable, and it's going to be a black mark on his legacy that you left a team during a playoff run. And you can't say, oh, I'm the only other coach that's going through this. They made the point on their show. Luke Fickell agreed to go to Wisconsin, but he coached Cincinnati through the playoffs. I just don't get it. And I like Lane. I've been really disappointed in how this has been handled because, again, I know he cares about his players. I'm sure that he does. But all this past month has been about is Lane and next year, and not the team on the field that deserves all the acclaim and all the recognition. And I think that in and of itself is the true tragedy of it all. Graham, what do you make of that? And I mean, do you agree with my take on Lane Kiffin, or do you have a little bit of a different spin on it?
Yeah, I do think that we're in a new era of college football where the transfer portal is basically free agency. Coaches stay and go. Their leashes are shorter than they've ever been. So I think I understand where Lane's coming from. And it's shown in the past that, he doesn't care about relationships that he might have to, or bridges that he might have to burn down in order to get to the place that he wants to be. And I think he wants to be at the top of college football. And I think we both would agree that Ole Miss is not the top of college football. They've had a great year this year. They have had the best year in Ole Miss history when it comes to football. But I still don't think that I don't see any road for them to win the national championship. I don't think they're any better or could win against Georgia again if they played again.
You don't?
A&M, no. A&M, Ohio State, maybe Indiana. So I understand that the times have changed. And I think that as football fans, we have to realize that too. Now we can have a completely other discussion about the college football calendar, but I don't think this should be the thing that sets it off. I think that it should be, again, about the players and making sure what's best for them is what takes precedence, and not what happens to coaches. But I also don't know that LSU and Florida are the jobs that they used to be. I think that for Lane Kiffin, is Ole Miss the best in the country? No. But what risk you're taking to go to LSU or to Florida is you're basically you're taking you're at the almost the top ladder. You're not all the way at the top ladder, but you're 3/4 of the way up. Almost all the way up, and then you decide to go to LSU or to Florida, and you're not going back to the bottom, but you're stepping back some because you're going to have to rebuild those teams to be competent and be competitive in the college football landscape. Now, do I think that LSU and Florida have better chances of building championship rosters? Sure. I think that NIL and transfer portal has a big deal and has a lot to do with the teams that are most successful. But you look at the root of all of the teams that are, at the top upper echelon of college football. They're still developing talent and they're still recruiting at a high level. Now, Lane's done a good job of developing and recruiting at a high level, but he's not at the highest level. And I don't think he can be at Ole Miss because, I'm not going to say the pipelines, but there's a lot more 5-stars and a lot, there's probably more 4 and 5 stars in the New Orleans area than there are in the whole state of Mississippi. And then, Florida's just a completely different place because there's talent anywhere and everywhere in Florida. So I see the appeal to it, and I see the appeal for it. Now, one thing I will say that I don't feel bad for Lane Kiffin. He gets to make his own bed, and he gets to sleep in it. And if he gets $90 million at LSU, go for it. If he gets $90 million at Florida, go for it. If he gets $90 million at Ole Miss, go for it. Doesn't change my life that much. It does change the college football atmosphere, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And I think that, unfortunately, this might be the thing that puts it over the edge that really requires the NCAA, requires Congress to start reining in what is acceptable in this new era of college football. Where, like you said, Hampton, and Lane said, kids don't love the schools like they used to because they didn't grow up playing and cheering for Ole Miss, and now they play for Ole Miss. I think the same can be said of Lane Kiffin. He didn't grow up wanting to be the head coach at Ole Miss. I don't think that's on his bucket list. I think he's fine where he is, but I don't think that's on his bucket list of dreams and goals is to be the head coach at Ole Miss. Now, can he accomplish his dreams better at LSU or Florida? Like we said, we don't know. But I do think he does have to take a risk in order to do that. So if I was Lane Kiffin, I'd stay at Ole Miss because I think just where you are right now, 10-1, the only way to win is the only way to win the playoff is to be in it. And right now, Ole Miss is in it. Florida's not. LSU's not.
They're not even
Ole Miss is.
close.
Yeah, Ole Miss is. So if your dream is to win a national championship, you got to be in the big game. You got to be at the party. And right now, that's where Ole Miss is. I want to give the listeners the odds of where Lane Kiffin will be the coach next. So I would say, and I think that a large part of the college football, media that really follows college football a lot would probably say that that Lane Kiffin's going to stay at Ole Miss. Just everything going the way that it is, he's going to stay at Ole Miss.
That's what you think?
That's what I think.
Okay. I do not personally think he's staying at Ole Miss.
So the odds, I'll say this: the reason why I'm skeptical of that is that they said they would put out they would decide after the Egg Bowl, they put the word out. So that kind of makes it seem like that does make it seem like he's leaving. But I just I just don't know. I don't know that it's worth the risk to go to LSU or Florida. But I mean, then again, I'm not having to turn down a $90 million check either. So maybe that changes the discussion too.
But Ole Miss said they would match that pretty much.
Yeah, I know. So right now the odds are LSU, for him to be the head coach at LSU is minus 200. So, very favorable that he's going to be at LSU. Plus 175 at Florida. So Ole Miss is third on the list. So, man, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I do think that a lot of the other jobs out there are not going to be determined until Lane Kiffin decides where Lane Kiffin's going to be. Because I think when you look at it, the candidates for Auburn would be similar candidates to Ole Miss. The candidates for Florida are completely different, but they're trying to hit a home run and get Lane Kiffin. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's just a lot of stuff that still has to mix up and shake out in order for the rest of these to kind of take place.
Mm-hmm. He's the big domino to fall.
Yeah,
once he falls, everything else will pretty much sort itself out. And I'll kind of try to wrap all this up and then we can get out of here. You mentioned that Lane doesn't care what anybody thinks. And I think he loves to give that vibe off or that persona, but I think he truly does. Because if you remember, when he left Tennessee, he gave that press conference that was ill-advised and probably dumb, but he did that because he wanted to speak to the fans and let them know where he was coming from because he truly cared what they felt. And I feel like throughout this whole process, he's tried to paint it as he's the victim in all this.
And he's definitely not the victim.
And he's not the victim. No, Ole Miss is the victim. Ole Miss and their fans right now are the victim because, again, when they should be cherishing what this season is, you got to deal with this crap, which is so frustrating. And I tell you this right now, Graham, I agree that especially 10 years ago, this wouldn't be a contest. It'd be you go to LSU or you go to Florida. But at Ole Miss, you were on the precipice of being in the dance and having an opportunity to play for a national championship. When's the last time LSU competed for a national championship? 2019? And then they fired the coach who took them to the national championship 2 years later. Florida, they hadn't sniffed the national championship in 16 years, and they fired coaches who literally took them to the SEC championship. At Ole Miss, you would have to have 3 or 4 5-win seasons for them to get rid of you because you were that revered in that community. And I'm telling you, at some point, especially when you can win at the level that he's won there, and the barriers to talent aren't what they used to be, and he has made it a priority that they're going to focus on portal recruiting more than high school recruiting. That's his philosophy. Then you kind of got it made because Ole Miss is completely aligned with NIL, with support from the administration, with all of that, and at LSU and Florida right now, I don't think there's a guarantee that that's the case. It may be, but it's still a little bit of an unknown because you truly don't know, but you know that at Ole Miss. So it's going to be fascinating to watch where he ultimately ends up going. Again, I think he's going to LSU, and we're going to probably find out this weekend. And I'll just say this, and I'll leave you, Graham, and you'll have the final word. If he leaves for LSU, but especially if Ole Miss loses this Friday to Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl, Oxford is going to make what Tennessee did after he left look like a tea party. It is going to be an absolute you-know-what show in Oxford if they lose that game because of him being distracted and that building not being fully unified and fully cohesive because of the circus that has been going on. Again, folks, you don't get this in the NFL. You only get it in college football, and that is one of the many reasons why we love it. Graham, you have the final word.
Yeah, man. This is what makes college football so exciting is that things change so often, and when they change so fast. Like, just it's 1 week for the next, things are completely different, which is the exciting thing. It's not good when the playoff committee does it, but it's good when coaches do it and when players do it. That's when it's fun. Man, I would say this is my final point, that sometimes we overlook good to try and chase for great.
Yep.
And I think that's what Lane Kiffin is kind of having to do right now. You know, I think the Ole Miss job is like made for him. Like his personality fits there. You know, the culture around Ole Miss is like very equivalent to Lane Kiffin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say that he did leave Tennessee to go to USC, and that didn't work out well. So maybe that's part of the reason why I'm thinking that he might stay. But Lane Kiffin, if he leaves Ole Miss, is going to be the most hated person in all of America. I think it's fair to say there might be another civil war because Mississippi and Tennessee are on the same page.
Starkville will be happy too.
Oh yeah, Starkville will be happy. But that's my only take. You know, don't overlook good trying to chase for great. And like I get that you want to be great, but I just don't know if he can get it any better than like could it be better than what he has at Ole Miss? Sure. But is it really out there? I just don't know. But luckily, it's not up to me to decide. It's not up to you to decide. And if it was, they'd be paying us a lot more money than they're paying us now.
And they should be paying us a lot more money than they're paying us now, which is nothing. But I'll end with this. And we've said this quote on our show multiple times because we love this show. And it's truly resonant. And I would tell Lane Kiffin this. You got to know that you're in the good old days before you left them. You're in the good old days right now, dude. Don't screw it up for the allure of more. There's such a thing as a disease of more, and I think that is what he's fighting against right now. And again, I think if he leaves, it's going to be one of the bigger mistakes of his life and especially of his coaching career. Even if he wins at LSU, which I think he would, even if he does, who's to say that when he gets to LSU, we're not 5 or 6 years down the road and something similar happens where there's another opportunity that comes open and we're back
to the NFL.
Yeah, the NFL, exactly. So that's my advice, Lane, because I know you're listening. Know you're in the good old days before you left them. And I know one thing, Graham, we're in the good old days right now, man, and it was a great show. I'm glad we got to do it again and talk a little college football. We will be back next week to recap the Iron Bowl, recap what is going to be an unbelievable week of college football. It starts on Friday, goes through Saturday night late, and we need it to make up for what it was a pretty lackluster college football slate this past weekend. So We appreciate each and every one of you guys for listening, for subscribing. Please do that if you haven't already. If you made it this far, leave us a like, leave us a comment, and hit that notification bell. We will be back next week, but until next time, the Pigskin Cafe is closed for now. But until next time, and I just repeated myself, chew on that.